Hi everyone, how's it going? Welcome to Automation, the Car Company Tycoon game. This game was voted as the next series that I should do on my Discord, and if you'd like to get involved in that kind of thing, direct in the channel, the link to the Discord will be down below. And this one came out ahead, so this is going to be our next series. And I'm going to be doing the series in a bit of a different way from normal. Normally I record the footage ahead, and then add in the voiceover and sort of post-production editing. This time I'm going to be trying to record all of the voiceover as I go along. We'll see how that goes. I will still be skipping ahead of anything that just gets tedious, and I'll certainly be doing like time lapses for the car creation decoration parts, just so you don't have to see me messing around with the position of lighting for an hour. But otherwise, we can jump into this. So I'm going to be doing a campaign here. For those of you who have not seen this game before, in this game you run a car company. You design and manufacture cars and try and corner the market. And you've got quite a lot of freedom with what you do, what kind of vehicles you choose to make. You can go for sort of jack of all trades, make pretty much everything, be a sort of a Toyota, making everything from sporty cars to light delivery vehicles. Or you can focus on one area of the market, going for high-end cars, cheap cars, sporty cars. So the last time I played this myself, I played over here as Arana. So as you can see, the world isn't the real world. It's this fantasy setting. It's set in 1946 is the game start, and pretty much they've just had their version of World War II on this little continent here. So Arana here, this kind of fills in for Russia and Eastern Europe post World War II. So this is pretty dirt cheap area, not a lot of wealth going around here. And so I played as a ex-tank manufacturing company, and they just made really dirt cheap cars for the mass population, as well as a few limited runs of nice fancy limousine type things for, the political elite. We've got quite a few other countries here, so I want to do something different. It's kind of going around this. Over here we've got Delua. We kind of fill in for the Middle East, mostly Saudi Arabia. This is a very small but incredibly wealthy area, really like their super high-end cars, but they don't buy a lot of them early on. Gazmia here, the big country. This is a stand-in for basically Western Germany, France, Britain, America. This is kind of block of what the Western powers were. They like big, safe, happy cars. Hetvasia here is Switzerland, very mountainous region, really into their safety. But I think we're going to be starting over here in Fruinia. And Fruinia is basically Italy, Italy/Austria. And so fairly mountainous region, but really like their sports cars. So we can see the country tastes here. And so they don't mind too much about drivability, but they really like sportiness in this country. And so we're going to be doing a lot of manual engines, manual gearboxes and things like that. They don't really care about safety, and importantly, they don't really like size. They want small cars here, which makes sense if you've ever seen or driven around Italy. They've got a lot of narrow, winding roads, a lot of streets that really aren't designed for cars. And so we'll be looking at making nice sports cars. To kind of tie the story in with what I've been doing previously on the channel, I thought we could be playing an ex-aircraft manufacturer. Since the war's just ended, I figure fighter manufacturers will have to start diversifying, and so we know how to make engines, we know how to make planes, but we're changing over to civilian cars since that's where the market is now. So we're going to be doing lots of fancy high-end sports cars, or pretty much trying to fill in anything with the sports demographic. And for the company name, we're going to go for our Shole. So our Shole cars for our Shole drivers. And we'll be starting in 1946. Difficulty level edited in minutes, but let's start around the hard difficulty setting. I do want to edit some of this a bit. Mostly I want to put competition setting up. I'd like this to be on 100%. This basically scales how popular your cars are compared to everyone else's. So at 100%, you've got equal footing on everyone else. Lower than 100%, people inexplicably like your cars a little bit more. The reason why I want to set this on 100% is mostly because that gives me a nice easy number to aim for when I'm designing the cars. At 100%, it means if you designed a competitive car, you will have a car competitiveness at 100 or above. If it's going to struggle, if you've not done a good job, it will be below that. Because I don't know all that much about cars, I think this is a fair one. In the last game, I was making things that were really quite rubbish, and they were getting several hundred competitive ratings, and I was making money anyway, and it just seemed a bit of a cheat. Now, here's our starting tech. That will give us some early bonuses and also help improve the quality of certain parts going throughout the entire game. So you can see there's quite a lot here. So we've got our engine tech in blue, the car tech here in red. And so engine tech, we've got the bottom end, the top end, they're mislabeled there. So I think engine architecture should be the top one. Aspiration, fuel systems, and exhaust all get their own sliders. And then with car tech, we've got bodies, so what actual bodies are available, the underlying chassis material, interior, entertainment, safety, drivetrain, tires, brakes, aerodynamics, and suspension. As I said, we're going to be kind of aiming for this ex-fighter pilot company. So we should know quite a bit about the actual engine part. We made engines for planes, and we just need to kind of scale those down. We're not going to be putting a 1,000 horsepower engine into a little sports car. We still know how to make them, so I'm going to give myself a few bonuses here. And probably go to about +3 on all of these. If you look at the state of aircraft engine research, it was really quite far ahead in the Second World War. There are lots of ideas that were common in aircraft you don't really see being that common in regular cars until much, much later. Things like fuel injection. So give yourself 3 years bonus on all of those. I also figure we'll be pretty good at aerodynamics compared to your regular run-of-the-mill company. So if we can make a plane fly, we can make a car go across the ground pretty good. Otherwise, we're probably not really going to have much of this. I mean, you could argue that we should have some safety, but really safety in a plane comes down to stopping bullets and giving easy access to parachutes, neither of which I think are going to help us here. Equally, I don't want to give any bonuses to anything like body, chassis, and definitely not like interior or entertainment. We're making military planes, nothing else. And otherwise, I'm just going to boost up the cash a little bit. I'm happy to leave our factories on medium. Yeah, I'll leave plot sizes on medium and factory size on small for all of our factories. I'm going to boost the cash up a little bit just to get a score multiplier of about 3.0. And so these are the last settings that we have here. We've got market volatility. Just means how often you get recessions versus how often you get large spikes. I'll just leave that on medium. The dealership networks here, these are how well you can advertise in your countries to begin with. I think I'm just going to leave those on the default settings. We can expand as we go forward. Really going to be doing a lot of sports cars, so fairly small market to begin with, so I'm happy leaving these relatively low. And engineering time here, this is how long it takes to research. I'm quite happy with the 100% engineering time. This is mostly just if you want to get your cars out faster, you can certainly tweak that. I'm happy leaving it at 100%. So there we go, that's all set. And so let's jump into the campaign. And so this is just a bit of a general blurb. We're playing in Light Campaign version 4.0 for anyone looking at this at a later date. So the Light Campaign isn't quite their full campaign. As you see, we've only got one continent. They're still working on a lot of features. This is still well in early access. But they've added quite a lot. I think I played on Light Campaign 3.0 before, so they've added some things. But 3.0 is a lot of fun, and so I'm sure we'll have a lot of fun here. And so this is just showing that we've got our new company, and we're ready to start the car. And they've changed this a little bit from the last campaign. Now it launches you straight into what your first car is going to be, just to give people a bit of a helping hand with getting started. A lot of people got lost early on. Now I'm going to create a new car from scratch. And then here we're just picking our desired demographic that we're going to aim for. This doesn't change anything for the car. All this does is highlight a certain demographic going forward so that we can keep an eye on the numbers as we make changes to the car. And so I can see here I've got various heat maps that we have. If I limit to awareness, that just limits it by people who know the company. We're a brand new company, so people really don't know us right now, which is absolutely fine. Equally, we can only export to two countries right now. Our home country of Fruinia, and we've got Helvetia. As the campaign goes on, the other countries will start to open up. For now, we've just got these two, and right now I just really want to focus on Fruinia. I will be exporting it to both, but may as well check both. And so here we've got untapped revenue, so this is the amount of money we could possibly be making if we were selling 100% of cars to these particular demographics. So some are quite big. Family and light delivery markets are huge here. And that makes sense. If you want to mass produce cars to make lots and lots of money, you should be exporting to the family market or to light vans. Light vans, in particular in Fruinia, are very popular over regular. They said they like little cars. But I'd prefer to be looking at these sort of more sporting ends. So we can see some of the sport cars aren't really a thing yet. There's no such thing as supercars or hypercars yet. But we could look into family premiums, family sports, or regular sports here. And looking at these, certainly the family sport would give us more money, but I think a regular sports one here is a bit more fitting with what I'm going for. Can maybe target in particular light sports. Light sport model is still got revenue of 30 million. That's not far off these family markets. And definitely falling into that sort of sport category that I want to go for this run through. If I hover over it, we see what they like. The top one is drivability, so they do care quite a bit about that, but mostly they just want very high sportiness. The little diamond symbol a little further down is prestige. They do care about that, and so we'll be going for this. Notably, they want something with a coupe body type, and they want exactly 2 seats, no more, no less. And so that's what we're going to be targeting going forward. And so now we're presented with a list of what car body types we can pick. So we're starting in 1946. I don't have any bonuses to the car bodies, so I've only got things up to 1946 available. And we can see little symbols on these. So each horizontal row is one model type, and then the different columns are different sort of subclasses within that. So for example here, this particular 1946 sedan, you've got a couple of variants for the convertible type and a couple of variants for the non-convertible frame. On each of them, they also have the year that they become available and also the wheel span to give you some idea of how big they are, because sometimes it's not very clear. Just glancing at that, it's a bit unclear which of those is larger, but we can see these only have a 2.2 meter wheel span. These have a 2.9, so this is much, much larger for a vehicle. So looking here, this is certainly an option, the 1946 coupe. It's small at 2.1 meters, so that would fit in nicely. We've got a convertible option, so we can make a second model within our car. And we've got a full coupe version. Just going to check what else we have while we're here. So these are all much larger. These aren't too much larger, this set. Just looking at these, just a difference between a 4-door and a 2-door, but they both all just have 2 seats, so that's not really going to help us much. We've also then got these ones down here, which do look quite a bit different. And so these again have the option of a convertible, hardtop convertible, or a regular coupe. And we've got those in various sizes. We've got some smaller, cheaper cars from the 1940, but I don't think those really fit ours. So here for me, it's kind of a choice between these smaller 2.3 ones here, or this one over here. I kind of like the look of this one. This looks like a small Italian car, so I'm going to go for this 1946 coupe. Has 2 seat rows, but we can just take out the rear seats. That gives it a little more space. So then going forward, we have to get the chassis sorted. So this is our general model of the car that's now been generated. We can edit this as we go forward. So here we've got a choice of material. We can go for steel or aluminium. Now steel is a lot cheaper, but a lot heavier. But most importantly, you can only use this if you've got steel presses in your factory, which require medium factories. We only start with small factories. So if we wanted to use steel, we'd have to upgrade our factories straight away, which I'd prefer not to do on the first run. And so I'll go for aluminium. This is a lot less efficient. We have to do this by hand. The advantage there is you don't need big presses to be able to do it. And I think that should be fine if we're just hand making a few sports cars. That's absolutely fine. And we get the bonus that this is nice and light as well. Now for our chassis type, at the moment we've just got a choice of ladder or space frame. And so ladder is the simpler option, space frame is more complex. Space frame has a lot more production units, you can see there, so it's going to be a lot more expensive. It's also a bit safer, a bit cheaper, and importantly has a very much higher engineering time. And I don't think this is worth it. We're already going for aluminium, that's cutting down our weight a lot, so I think we can cheap out on the chassis type. As for our panel material, the chassis material, going to go for steel there as well. We don't need any additional upgrades. Could go for galvanized steel, which makes it a little more corrosion resistant. I think I'm going to cheap out here again. We're spending a lot on the panel, so I don't want to spend too much and make this just an unaffordable monstrosity. The engine can only fit in the front of the compartment here, so we don't have a choice there. On a lot of the other cars, you get choices if you want it in the front, in the back, if you want it longitudinal or horizontal, and there are also options for putting it in the middle on some variants. Now for our suspension, here, this is largely to do with comfort, and so we can see some of the comparisons here. Double wishbone is by far the most comfortable option. I'm not sure if we're actually going to go for that, just because of how intensive it is on the engineering time, but I might do. We do get a bonus on the first car we create. It's a little bit easier, a little bit quicker to produce. And so I think double wishbone and double wishbone just take the hit now, and then that will give us some experience using these so we can put these in our cars in the future. It gives us a nice bit of comfort even though we're not going to be good at interior design. Now here we've got a quality slider. I'm mostly going to be leaving that alone. The quality dramatically increases the engineering time and the cost per unit of anything you have, but it does make it quite a bit better. It's just a little bonus to make everything better or make everything cheaper. Mostly I leave this alone for the first run, but when I go back to a facelift I might tweak a couple of things there. Now that's as far as we can get until we design the engine. So here we go over to the engine design screen, and we create a new engine project. And so here we've got family name and variant. For now, I'm probably just going to leave these blank until we know what we're putting together, and I can just rename that later. So here we choose the overall engine block. So these stay pretty consistent throughout the entire game. We've got various options of inlines. We do get a few more choices here. Get the 60 degree and 90 degree separated V layout. And there's also a boxer engine. As I said, we're basing this on an aircraft designer, and so I think a V engine would be good. This is still in line as far as aircraft would describe it. Most inline aircraft were V-type engines, not necessarily this kind of inline. So we'll go for one of these, and I think a V8 engine seems like a pretty good option. Now we really aren't going to need a lot of power here for a couple of reasons. One is we've already got a really light vehicle, so it's not going to need a lot of power to get it to go forward. And on top of that, in 1946, the wheels are absolute trash, and so you just aren't able to take advantage of a big, powerful engine. You just get wheel spin. So I said I'm going to really lower this down. And so the way we do this is by changing the capacity of each individual cylinder, and it works out what the total is by there. And we've got our bore size here, so how wide the individual pistons are, and here we've got the stroke height, and they're sort of tied together. You can't make one much bigger or much smaller than the other, it'll start dragging it down. They have slightly different effects. But overall, I think if we go for this configuration, gives us high RPM, and I think that's what we really want for this engine. So I'm going to go for minimum stroke length here, and cut down the bore size, and aim for about a 1 litre engine here. I should probably say at this point, if you're looking for expert engine knowledge here, you're not going to find it with me. Most of my knowledge of engines has come from this game in particular. I'm a chemist by training, so I can talk plenty about the actual chemical reactions going on in these engines and catalytic converters and so on. Not so much about the engineering. But the nice thing about this game is it's actually a really good point to start getting into engines. Every single one of these options, we have a really quite detailed explanation of what that component does. And for these sort of sub choices, sometimes they have special descriptions of what that one particular choice is. So it really helps you understand what you're choosing here when you're faced with all of these different options. So now when it comes to heads and valves, we've got a choice between good old-fashioned push rods and various overhead cam options. I'm going to go for the direct acting overhead cam here. It seems a pretty good option all in all. You get reduced friction compared to push rods. It's a little bit more expensive to make, but it's also a little bit easier on the engineering time. And one thing that's very important in this game is you start to get knowledge as you go forward. You get familiarity with all of these different fields. And so the more you focus on one sort of thing, the better it is going forward. I think focusing on something a little more quality is going to help us. We're going to be making sports car engines, so we're going to need something fairly decent. Now, our head material, we really don't get a choice of yet. This will be unlocked later, as will variable valve timings. So we can just go ahead. So now we're changing the individual model, and here we've got various options of what the crankshaft is made from, what the conrods are made from. Really at this point we're not doing anything too powerful, so we don't really need any of these heavier materials. We can get away with just having cast iron everything, and that'll do perfectly well. Now here's a variant capacity. So the first one is the family. We can make a specific variant with a lower capacity if we want to. Just essentially shrinking down the bore sides, adding more metal there. We don't need to do that for this one at all. So we go on to the top end, we've got various different sliders. So engine compression level, essentially higher this is, kind of the better. But then the problem is you need higher and higher octane fuel to make up for that, otherwise you start getting knocking. So for now, I'll tweak that down a bit since we're not going to have the best fuel. The cam profile here, we want to make this sporty, so we want good high RPM performance, and so we want to tweak this up a little bit. So let's make the engine less smooth, less fuel economy, but the people of Fruinia don't care about that. They care about sportiness. Sportiness likes high revving engines. And the rest of this is, again, locked for now. So we go on to aspiration. And we don't have any kind of turbo injectors here yet, unfortunately. Again, those will come with research. Now, apparently we knew how to put them on aircraft. We can't work out how to stick them into a car. I guess makes sense with the size some of those turbo systems were on like the P47. And here we have our fuel system. Again, we haven't discovered fuel injection yet, so we have to deal with carburetors. And we've got various options for our carburetors. Single barrel eco, and 2-barrel. And I don't think the Fruinians really care that much about emissions or fuel efficiency, so we can just go for single barrel, and again maybe trying to make this a little bit cheaper. We don't need huge power just now, so for now I'll put this on single. And our intake, basically the bigger the intake, the better airflow we can get out of it, but then the higher service cost, because you're going to end up having to repair it more often. Standard intake has a lot of filters there, really good for the engine, but blocks some of the airflow. Now, really important. Question is what fuel type we're going to use. And since we're going for a general light sports category, I'm going to see if we can get away with just using the regular leaded. There's no option for unleaded here. This is 1946, so lead is the way. I'm sure it won't cause any problems going forward. We can always do another engine variant with higher quality, or just change this as we go forward. Now we've got a few other options here. So we've got fuel mixture, so we can make the mixture richer or leaner by default. Lower is better for fuel economy and emissions. Higher can be better for getting more power out. We'll increase that a little bit. Engine and ignition timing. Here we can play around with this a bit later. Mostly we can either get more power or lower the octane requirement. And finally, the RPM limiter. We'll definitely adjust this once we get the graph in a moment. Let's put this up. I think 7,000 is going to be too high, but we'll see that soon. And for our exhaust, here we've got a bit of a choice. The fancier and straighter the tubes are, the less resistance you have and the better flow rate you have. But by far the more complicated it becomes. And so these shortcast, or even the shortcast log, this takes a month to figure out. This takes 18 months to figure out this race design, which looks horrible, but apparently it takes into account the exact flow rates. You get nice sort of resonance effects within the exhaust to actually improve efficiency. I think I'm going to start with the midpoint and put this in as tubular. And we probably don't really need much of an exhaust, but let's go for dual exhaust just because making fancy sports cars may as well. For muffler, I'm going to only put on one muffler just to give us some dampening, but still with some noise there. Again, sports buyers like a bit of noise in their engine. So now that's actually enough that it has generated our engine, and here we can see our power curve. So we've got power in horsepower up the side and the RPMs. You can see it's peaking around there. And we've got our warning labels here. And importantly, this engine is knocking right now. And so there's a couple of things I could do. I could simply change the fuel type here. Change the fuel type to super leaded. That goes away. If I go back, we can see the reason why this is knocking is this engine requires 92.9 RON, and we only have 92 RON in this regular leaded. So I need to lower that octane a bit. It's probably going to be the easiest way to go about fixing this. I'll be right back after I've fiddled a bit. Okay, so here we go. Played around with it a little bit. So there are a couple of issues with the initial setup. One is that our single carburetor really wasn't providing enough fuel. That was shown here. We had this giving us a warning. And so I changed that up for a twin carburetor, and that shot our power right up. And I played around a little bit, mostly lowering and then re-increasing the compression, increased the cam profile quite a bit. And I also restricted the exhaust. The exhausts were too wide. I could have got around that by making a single exhaust. Instead, I just made a very narrow double exhaust. Possibly not the best idea, but double exhausts are fun. I've ended up with this. Don't worry that this is showing a little bit less than green here. Having a slightly restricted exhaust is apparently a good thing. And certainly this is the highest power output. So we're getting 61 horsepower out of this. And we've got a pretty nice plateau here over a couple thousand RPM range. This is definitely geared for high RPM rather than low RPM. That's fine, we wanted this to be sporty. And so there is our car. Oh, there is our engine. Now we can edit the look of the engine, put colours and things on. This is still a little bit of a work in progress. But we're going to be hiding the engine in the car. I'm not making any sort of see-through bonnet or anything, so I'm not really worried with how this looks. But this is our engine. And so we need to give this a name. And so this family name is going to be our V8, then direct acting overhead cam. And the particular variant that we're using, we're making a 1 litre, and we've designed this in 46. So this is the naming scheme that I'm going for my engines. And some people like to listen to the engine, and so this is the sound of our brand new engine. So we go, we've got that 61 horsepower, 68 nanometer torque engine here. Torque curves in red. You see the torque does peak a little bit before the power does. And I did increase the RPM limiter since the original value of 7,000 would have been right here on this line, and so we would have lost all the performance over here. The way we go forward, and now we're making a particular trim for our car. And so I want to do the regular trim first, and then I'm going to make a convertible variant of it. And so this, we're just going to pick the standard coupe body here. It's 3 or 2-door. It's got a hatch at the back. I'll come back to decorating it later and do that in a time lapse. I will just modify the body beforehand, since this does have an effect on the stats. And so just making this vaguely presentable. And I'm looking for something quite small. But something that looks like a sports car. So they're not too worried about size, so I'm just going to decrease that, make that look a little more aerodynamic. Now it's like a good general overview. I'll come back to the fixtures and paint at the end. Now we can go on here, so we've got a choice of rear-wheel drive or 4x4. I'm just going to go rear-wheel drive, nice and simple. Only have a manual gearbox, but let's give it 4 gears. It's not too much longer engineering time than the others, and I think that's going to be worth it, especially on a sports car like this that you really want to keep up in that ideal rev range. Top speed and the spacing I can adjust later once I get some graphs. I'm not good at eyeballing these. And we don't need any differentials. This car is not going to be taken off the road. It can probably barely stay on the road as it is. Wheels, we've only got cross-play. And we're going to go for probably sports compound on these. We're trying to make a sports car here. As for the width, I want these to be as wide tyres as possible on the front and the back. That is going to be more expensive. It's kind of going to be worth it in terms of actually having something to grip on. If we increase the tyre diameter a bit, I can make these even wider to try and really maximize the grip area there. Make these wheels actually start having some effect. And this car is actually already looking better than some of my previous attempts at these 1946 cars, that tyre looks decent. Rim material, we've only got steel for now, so that's fine. Brakes, we don't have a huge amount of options. They're just going to be drum brakes for and back. Going to put a fair amount of braking on the rear. We can adjust those as needed. And leave that out there. We'll play with all of these settings as we go forward. Now, we're not going off-road, so we don't need any protective undertray. Not got any aerodynamics yet. We've got a bonus to aerodynamics, but there just isn't any here. Got no wings or anything we can put on it. And we'll put a medium, just enough airflow that doesn't pop up with a warning. We shouldn't need much braking airflow at all. Let's see if there are issues there. Now, they only wanted a two-seater, so I'm jumping straight to that, taking out the rear seats. We don't need any of that here. As for the interior, I think I'm just going to go for a sport interior with a basic premium radio. I could make it fancier and might put out a fancier version for a trim, but this should be fine for our initial version. There's no such thing as driver aids, and for safety, they don't really care about safety, so I'm going to cheap out and just go for standard 40s. Now the car is complete enough for it to run the stats on, and we can see here this is pretty decent. These are the numbers as if the car was released this year in the current market. It's going to take a few years to research and develop, so these numbers will go down as competitors release cars. The general idea is this top number here, this is the car competitiveness. If this is at 100, then you're doing good. That's a good target to have. If it's doing less than 100, it's really going to start struggling in that market. There are going to be better cars out there. And obviously, the higher it is above 100, the better. Then under this, we've got the affordability for the current market. So here, for example, our target demographic of light sports, we've got 121 competitiveness, so it's decent. Only 72.5% of this market can afford. Light Sports Premium, on the other hand, absolutely love this car. They really want to buy it, and most of them can afford it because that market has more money. And the track market is also really on board with this. If we go over here to markets, see a bit of a problem with that is that the track market is basically non-existent right now. This will change as things go forward, but there just aren't any people buying track cars. So really we want to focus on the light sports market, and that's just our initial setup. We can certainly do some more here. So we can certainly start editing this. So these are our top speed and gear ratios. As you can see, as we change here, we're changing what speed the top end of the gear is targeting, and the spacing changes how spaced apart they are. And ideally, we want good, even performance, which is a bit hard because this engine really only works well at high RPM, which is why we're just getting these spikes here. This is when the engine is going to high RPM. It's when it starts to drop off, and this is when the next gear is taking over. I'm going to play around with these settings for a bit, and I'll catch you once I've done that. Okay, so there we go. I've played around with some of the settings. There are a couple of big problems. Again, one was that the actual top speed of the car is this red line here. This is what its engine can make it do. And we had the gears set well beyond that, so we were wasting basically the entirety of that fourth gear. So I've changed that around. So now we've got decent speeds going from about 30 kilometers to about 150. You've got roughly a good spread there. You do lose quite a bit of power shifting from first to second, but otherwise pretty decent. The other major issue was that we had terminal oversteer. So at high speeds, the car would just take off, making it basically uncontrollable, which nobody likes. So instead I've adjusted that a bit, and so now at high speeds we have terminal understeer, which they much prefer. People prefer the car essentially not turning at very high speeds rather than it spinning out of control. I've got this adjusted to be perfectly on the line for sports models. So sports drivers like really pushing it here, about 70 kph. Regular drivers prefer it around here. We do have a little bit of wheel spin. I reduced the width of the wheels a bit just for pricing, but that's really well within regular bounds there. Brake-wise, I maxed out the brakes pretty much as I could, and then not getting anywhere near to the maximum brake value. So this is as best I can do with the brake technology that we've got right now. Aerodynamics are left pretty much the same. I turned down the interior really for an affordability. They don't care too much between having the sports interior and the standard interior, but we get an extra few percent of the market able to afford it. So I'll put out this one and I'll put out a more fancy premium lineup. Otherwise, safety, they definitely like that standard version. And this is how I fixed the terminal oversteer. You just have to tune the suspension. So I very much messed around with the camber settings just to bring that into position. Lowered the ride height a bit for a bit more added sportiness. And overall, this is now working quite nicely. And just to look at the markets, here's where this version falls in. So smack bang in track and light sports. So we don't really care about track, but it's good to know that it will sell there. It's also going to sell into the sport category. Sports budget can't really afford it. That's fine, I'm not really going for budget cars. But regular sport here can actually afford it really very well, and they really like it. And so that's really where I want it to be. I've got light sport and sport. You see, Convertable don't really like it because it's not convertible, and the family category don't like it because they're not enough seats, so I'll try and address that with the next trim. Here we can get detailed stats. This is mostly for problem solving. These are the basic stats that we've got here, so you can see drivability, sportiness is really what they care about. Comfort isn't great, but again, the Fruinian drivers don't really mind. Prestige is okay. I've cheaped out on quite a few things, but otherwise they seem to mostly like this. This isn't the most fuel efficient car, and it's clocking in at $3,000 of material costs in total. So we'll see what that comes out as the actual price when we go forward. Now what we can do is test this. So there's a couple of test tracks. There's the old airfield test track. There's this new automation test track. And nicely, this is also implemented in the game BeamNG Drive, which automation has a crossover with. And so I'll definitely be doing that in the next episode. I'll be taking the car that we've designed and driving it around this very track. Let's just see how this does on the computerized test here. So just a computer driver takes it around as best they can. So you hit 80 kph just before the first turn. I'm just going to skip through to the end. So it did the entire track just under 3 minutes, which is actually pretty good for a 1946 car. So we'll try this when I jump in and see how this handles. Incidentally, I have these on the old settings I was using, so most things are in metric except horsepower, which is obviously in horsepower. If you guys would prefer a different measurement scale, there are options here. So if you prefer me to be testing these in miles per hour, that's absolutely fine. Just let me know. If you'd prefer it in watts instead of horsepower, I can flip that over. Just let me know what you guys are used to, and I'll change that. For now, though, I'm going to go ahead and design this thing, try and make it look pretty. I'll show that to you in a time lapse, so I'll catch you at the end of that. Oh, there we go. There's my initial design. So this, I went for white in the end. I played around with a few colours, but decided the white looked quite good. White and black is the image I've got on my YouTube channel logo. As for the name of it, I've decided that I'm naming them after people in the Discord chat from the order that they've joined. And so Loyal was the first person to join, so he gets this first car named after him. So the trim number, this is made in 1946, and this is a light sports variant of this car. So there we go, we have our very first version. I'm exporting this version to BeamNG Drive, and so in a later episode I'll take it out for a drive there and see how we do. And then just to round off a little bit more, I am going to go and add a new trim to this car. So we've got the light sport variety. Also like to do a premium variety, so a more convertible, family-oriented variety. So using the same engine, so we don't have to design that twice. Same car here, but we're changing to the convertible body. I'm just going to go ahead and remove the nonsensical stripes on the roof. Otherwise, the rest of that fits on pretty well. Now, the big differences here are that I am going to change this to have more seating. Because the convertible sports are happy with anywhere between 2 and 4 seats. And the family category, I would prefer to have 5. Convertible family sport, happy with 4. So I'll stick with a 4-seater version, try and get both those markets. Now I'm going to make this a little bit fancier though. So putting in a little bit more fancy. Got detachable or manual. They seem to really like the manual soft top, so I'll give them that. As I'm just going to quickly run around, polish a few settings on this, just tweak everything. I'll catch you again at the end. It's really not much mess around with here. I just tweaked a few settings. Notably, Family Sport hate it. It is not comfortable enough. I wasn't really going for comfort, but they can't really afford this anyway, so it's not really a good crossover. Convertible Sport, however, do absolutely love it. Convertible Sport budget would like it if they could afford it, so I'll get a couple sales there. Still, I think this is a worthwhile one to push forward. So I'm going to rename this the Convertible Sport variant of the Loyal. And then I will save this and we will go on to put this into production. So it's just an overview of this design. I've hit the sports convertible bracket quite well. Not very much the regular convertible. They don't like the body. The convertible markets prefer proper hardtop convertibles. This model only has the soft top. But otherwise they're relatively happy with it. Convertible Sports, very happy. And so we can just go forward from there. So to put this into production, we need to pick a car factory. Right now we've just got one car factory. So here's our factory screen. Currently we have one small factory on this plot. I don't really want to change that. Can go up, but that would cost us 50 million to upgrade to a medium. I could upgrade to one of these slightly larger ones. We'll just see what it looks like with the amount of cars we're able to produce. For now, I'll just leave this as a small one. We only have 400 million. So I didn't need any of these additional add-ons. I could put in QA testing and maintenance. I might leave that off for now. And it is both the light sports and the convertible sports versions that I'm putting in. Don't know what's happened with the preview there. Over here we have what's going to be set up. So we've got varying levels of automation. We don't really want to boost this too much. A lot of it is going to be handmade, so we're going to lose a lot of efficiency very quickly if we put too much automation in. People are essentially spending all their time trying to get things onto an automated line just to take it off and hand make the next section. Tooling quality though seems about right, and I'll leave the QA threshold where it is, so any cars below this threshold get binned. I can bump that up. I want higher overall quality. Leave that as it is. And let's boost the worker wages just a little bit. Increase how everything is getting built. Okay, so as that stands, our two models, the convertible sports version is costing us 2.5 grand to make the car, and the light sports is 2.2 grand to make the car. Okay, so just to check here, the actual demographic we're looking at is the light sports category. Buying about 114 is what we can expect to sell into with our awareness. Goes up to about 2,000. And if we look here, we were planning on producing 244 a month. So we'll see how that does. We may need to upgrade the factory quite soon. This might be a good initial rollout. We have to do the same for the engine. So again, we want the engine factory to be about the same size. Here we've already got an iron foundry, so I'll just leave that be. We do need irons. We've got all iron cast material there. And otherwise we can leave most of this the same. I'll bump up worker wages a little bit as well. Otherwise leave that. So we're making the engine for a little over $900. This game doesn't take into account inflation, so you can put the prices onto modern world stuff. Although the cars do get more expensive as they get further on, just because cars got percentage-wise more complicated. Now this is our engineering screen, so we actually need to pay people to, do what we have asked them to do, actually design these things. And here are our current numbers. So as it stands, it would cost us 5 million to design the engine, and it would take 36 months. I'd prefer to get the car out sooner than that. I'm going to bump up the funding a bit. Doesn't seem to be helping too much. See here, There's a few factors that are going into this, but it's our fuel system and our exhaust are taking the most pressure. We can probably increase the pressure a little bit to bring that down. So essentially double the amount of money and increase the pressure on the staff a little bit. And can probably reduce the reliability a bit. We're making sports cars, we're not making everyday cars. So if I target 2 years here, this is the months it will take to complete. So I'll target 24, see what the car does, and I might flip back and forth between them. As it stands, that's fine. We are going to produce 400 engines a month. Can only produce 200 cars a month, so we've got perfect overlap there, or perfect overflow there. If we upgrade the car factory, we probably don't need to upgrade the engine factory immediately. I seem to skip past doing that for the actual car itself. And so I want to do the same thing here. I want to get this down to 24 months, so it takes the same amount of time for both of these. There we go. 23.9 months is the exact same for both of them. So we can go to the forecast screen. So all in all, with the material cost, the actual prices of the engines, these cars, the light sports model in total is costing us 8.5 grand. Convertible is costing us 11 grand. And we could try and sell them at that price. Be an interesting decision, but we won't really make any money that way. So instead, we can play around with these settings a bit more. So I can increase the price to try and put a bit of a surplus here. So I'll see how these settings do. So what I've done is I've increased our expected awareness. So I'm going to be starting to advertise as soon as we start this, try and build up our awareness a bit faster. What I've ended up doing is putting really a substantial markup on the light sports model. They seem happy with almost 45% markups, so selling these for 12 grand, while the fancier convertible sports only has a 20 grand markup. That's still giving us really quite a healthy, 20% markup, so 2 grand markup. That's still giving us really quite a healthy increase there. Looking at our factories, they do seem to be about right. So these are the predicted number of shifts. Don't really want this going above 2 shifts because 2 shifts would be 16-hour days. If you go above that, you have to pay people for night shifts, and so the cost goes up a little bit. But we're only just hitting that 2 shifts there, so probably should be absolutely fine. So for now, that's all looking good. As we can see here, the engineering time of both things is exactly the same. The factory time is only going to take 2 months. And if all goes well, in a few years, we should start making profit and make back what we're paying into this. Now we can, if we want to, put in a loan. I'm not going to. We've got 400 million in the bank. So we can take the total cost of 41 million on chin quite easily. That'll still leave us over with some to do some marketing. So we've got our 2 cars, or our car and our engine ready to go. And so I'm going to sign those off. Anyway, there we go. That's our first car ready to go. I will test it out in BeamNG Drive in the next episode, and we will see how this vehicle does. If you have any comments or questions, please do just leave them down below. If you want me to change the unit system, certainly do. If you have any advice for me, I'm not an engine expert, so please do send that my way. If you enjoyed this, do consider leaving a like and subscribing. And if you would like your name to be on one of these cars, just join the Discord channel. Otherwise, I hope you'll remember to have fun. Take care. Cheers.